Can you explain to us briefly what's been going on, going back to what happened to you when you were actually put on indefinite leave?
Yes, so there were indications following the November election last year that there was some apprehension, I would say, inside the Voice of America about Trump coming back into the power. And we started to notice what I would call a heavier hand in the editing of some of the scripts when it referred to Donald Trump. And I was actually called in for investigation by the Human Resources section of the U.S. Agency for Global Media, which is the parent agency of the Voice of America and other government-funded U.S. international broadcasters, regarding comments that I had made on two VOA programs, tape programs, one radio, one television, where I was basically they were trying to get me to admit that I had engaged in speculation and analysis, which I had never known to be a dirty word in my 20-year plus association with VOA. Nonetheless, I answered their questions. I said I did not feel that I had stepped over the line of VOA standards. And then there was some attention to tweets, what they used to be called tweets, on social media. I'm on a number of different platforms, including the former Twitter, where a high-ranking U.S. government official thought that a rather innocuous tweet that I made, reaction to the gutting of USAID, he felt that that was tantamount to treason, as he put it, which got some media attention. I do not give opinions, but there was some feeling that perhaps I was posting too much about those who were opposing the cuts to USAID. Of course, I also put what the president or the administration does, and for balance, I also put out statements or comments from civil liberties groups and members of the opposition in the U.S. Congress, et cetera, et cetera. Nothing different than I've been doing for almost 20 years on social media.
It wasn't even your opinion. It was somebody, you just reposted what somebody else had said. It wasn't even your thought. And why are you getting sort of penalized for that?
I don't know. You would have to ask them. Supposedly, because I was suspended on February 28th, the next sort of chronological issue, pending, I was suspended with pay, pending an investigation of my social media. In that letter that I received, it also quoted a mid-February executive order signed by President Trump, which was referring to the Foreign Service and the loyalty of Foreign Service officers, of which I'm one, not under State Department, but under the Voice of America, that those who are deemed not to be sufficiently loyal to the president's foreign policy can be punished or even fired. I think that letter made it very clear that this was a political retaliation against me and went far above and beyond the scrutiny of social media on an objective basis. But nonetheless, I welcomed VOA doing an investigation. I have not heard officially any result of that investigation. It's been more than 2 weeks. And as you know, this past weekend, all of my colleagues at the Voice of America were suspended with pay till further notice and told not to do any work, not to come into the VOA headquarters or any of our bureaus around the world. And since then, VOA has been starving for content. And I'll let people decide going on to look at the website and the video streams and the radio broadcasts, which are not broadcasting any information, whether VOA is just in a coma or it's dead today. I hate to say that, but that's the reality of the situation.
A journalist getting suspended in this way, and well, it might not be appropriate for me to say, but I mean, it's a bit like a badge of honor, isn't it? Like, you get suspended by a sort of administration because they're afraid of you, and which means you're doing your job correctly.
I don't know. I can't read other people's minds, or, unless this goes to a legal process and we go into discovery, where you can basically, the court can demand that any internal communications are revealed regarding what was going on. I don't know. Of course, I feel, and all of my colleagues that I've spoken with feel that I wasn't doing anything wrong. But I really don't want the overall conversation at this point to focus on me, because even if I left the Voice of America, VOA could go on. But now that everyone is not allowed to work at the Voice of America and there's no new programming, this is existential for the entirety of the Voice of America, which is a lot of a bigger societal issue than just me getting suspended. I think the most important achievement of Voice of America is that it has been consistent, reliable, and objective for 83 years. That we know from talking to people who listen to the Voice of America behind the Iron Curtain or on the continent of Africa or in Asia during those decades, about how much they appreciated it and what a difference it made in their lives.
Can you talk about specifics of, some of the voices that you've given who would have been voiceless without Voice of America?
Those are not only people who live or have lived in under authoritarian governments where it was very dangerous to speak out, currently in the approximately 50 languages of the Voice of America. Sorry, I'm still speaking in the present tense, but it's sort of hard to get used to the fact that essentially VOA is no more as of today. And also, when you talk about giving voice to the voiceless, that means going and talking directly in some of the most remote parts of the world, some of the most hostile parts of the world, or going in, as I did many times, to the front lines of, say, civil unrest or warfare or natural disasters, where we were able to talk to people directly and get out through video, audio, and text what exactly the situation was. I did that in the Philippines in recent years with Typhoon Haiyan. As you well know, I spent an extensive amount of time in Fukushima. When everybody was trying to get out of Fukushima, I was a crazy person trying to get in to Fukushima.
Are you proud of your works?
Absolutely. And I'm proud of the work of my thousands of colleagues, because we not only have full-time staffers, we have contract reporters, journalists, and in fact, those contractors were informed on Sunday night that they are terminated effective March 31st.
Do you feel that this is an attack on freedom of the press, first of all, and then American democracy?
I'll let other people characterize that. I can only speak for the work that I do. We are definitely in the middle of a very, very historical period. People I've been interviewing in recent months are questioning whether this is the end of the post-World War II order, the so-called liberal world order, and we're entering into some kind of a new phase. But those are answers that I leave up to the people that I interview, that I want to interview and want to continue to be able to interview.
You've seen what's been happening with AP, what's been happening with, other organizations, or like MSNBC being called names, et cetera, et cetera. This is not an isolated case. I just saw you on BBC, and I think British media is actually quite sort of interested in what's been going on, and they're quite alert about this as well. What do you think including us in Japan, what do you think journalists around the world can do to help with the freedom of the press in America right now?
Well, whether it's America or any other country, we have to continue exposing the shortcomings of of the relationship between governments and media, and to objectively report on the criticisms. And when they are totally unfounded, we need to push back aggressively. We've been very, very lucky in the United States, and I would argue also in Japan, compared to many, many other countries where journalists are regularly jailed. The Philippines, Mexico, where assassinations of journalists are a common occurrence.
Russia.
Well, Russia jailing and killing of journalists as well. So I don't take that for granted. And I don't think a lot of us these days take democracy for granted either. We want, of course, in a democracy, you want a healthy opposition. You want to hear different points of view. In the United States, the way it was set up by the founding fathers was this balance between the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judiciary, where they would share power. And, it's worked for, more than 200 years. I'm just hoping that me and my colleagues can continue to do the type of journalism that we have been doing.
What's the air like among American journalists right now? Is there a lot of fear, or like, I don't know if you're familiar with the word sontaku. Are you familiar with the word sontaku? Yeah. Do you think there's going to be much of sontaku, American version of sontaku going on because people are afraid of the administration? Or are there still sort of like, sort of journalism flame still, sort of like burning in the souls of the journalists?
There's absolutely, the flame is still burning in the souls of the journalists, but it's very diverse in this country. It always has been, but now with social media, smaller voices can become quite prominent and powerful very quickly. And sometimes those small voices are very high quality, and sometimes they're not, right? So there are a number of significant media outlets that would be perceived as cheerleaders of the current administration, just as there were media outlets that were perceived as cheerleaders of the previous administration. And I don't even think we can agree on definitions anymore across the board of what is the mainstream media, or what is fair, what is neutral, what is biased, which is really, really unfortunate. And as much as possible, I have just tried every single day to go do my job and report up to my personal standards and the standards of my organization. And, I see stuff on my social media feed all the time. People like this, they don't like this. I've gotten death threats in, recent weeks. As social media empowers, people who can stay anonymous to do all sorts of things. Sometimes that's a good thing to have, because again, people that are in repressed societies, autocratic countries, can speak about what's really going on, or give their opinion without having to worry about themselves being identified. But of course, like any good tool, a powerful tool, it can be used not only for good, but for bad as well.
Why are you getting death threats? For doing what?
For doing my job, I guess. And people believing some of the criticism. I don't want to repeat the things that they're saying, or their justifications. But that's become pretty common for a lot of journalists.
How would you respond to claims, whether it being Trump administration or his followers? How would you respond to the claim that VOA is like a propaganda organization?
By definition, we cannot be a propaganda instrument. Although I'm sure that there are some people on political extremes in different countries who will say that VOA is propaganda. Right now, we're seeing cheering in state-run media in Russia and China that VOA is shutting down. You have to ask themselves why they're so happy about it. But I say to people who believe that, may have heard about that VOA's propaganda, to go read the stories. They're in 50 languages, and you can make a judgment. I don't know how many more days all of that's going to be up on the internet, but there are archives on YouTube of our television stories, and people can watch them and see if they think that what we have been producing meets the definition of propaganda, and then compare it to other state run broadcasters in other major countries of the world.
I've recently written, a piece about dismantling of USAID, and one of the sort of beneficiaries of USAID was one of the independent media from Myanmar, I think. And their voices are about to get terminated. How can we keep their voices going?
If the USAID funding is not restored, then obviously they need alternative sources of funding. I saw something earlier in the day out of Prague that the Czech government is looking at a way to keep Radio Free Europe going if the US government is not going to fund it anymore. So unfortunately, others are going to have to step up to the plate.
Do you think Japanese government should be helping as well?
Well, I think that's a decision that all major democratic governments around the world need to look at. NHK has a modest external broadcasting effort. There's of course NHK World, and Korea's been doing that, and there's a number of examples of smaller countries that do that as well. I think that's one thing perhaps to look at in future, is how more countries can contribute and assist in the free flow of information for those in different parts of the world where it is difficult for them to do that because of government restrictions, or just because they don't have a lot of money. Quality of journalism comes from training journalists adequately and recruiting good journalists and having editors who will maintain high standards, and having management and ownership that believe in the mission and are committed to keeping it going.
You're not going to let journalism die, will you?
Not on my watch.